Hello, I'm Nathaniel Smith, and today we are going to finish my little video thing that I was doing, going over the best stories for Doctor Who for the new Doctors, ending with what we have so far of Peter Capaldi's Doctor. Now, hopefully in a few years when Capaldi leaves, and I hope that Capaldi leaves a long time from now, that isn't like near or anything. I hope he stays for a bit longer, actually, because Peter Capaldi is fucking awesome. Like, seriously, thank goodness he became the Doctor. I mean, he's so awesome as the Doctor, and such a breath of fresh air after all the other Doctors that we've had over years recently. So, awesome. Kudos to Peter Capaldi. Fucking awesome. Anywho, this is the list of the best stories so far we have of Peter Capaldi. Now, let me just state that these stories are good. And they are a huge improvement to the show for the last, compared to the last few years beforehand. But none of these stories I'm about to give are really, flawless. See, every story I mentioned previously actually is kind of flawless in its way. And even though people could be extremely nitpicky to certain stories that I mentioned previously, I have perfect defense to every complaint you could possibly give to pretty much every story I listed. But with these, there's obvious weak elements to it. Two of the stories have the exact same problem, actually, in part, and another one has another issue, but I'll get to that. Let's go over what we have so far that's really great of Peter Capaldi's, starting with, obviously, Mummy of the Orient Express. Seriously, they managed to make a really good, legitimate science fiction story of a flying space train. Kudos. And the whole way they did the Mummy is really awesome, too. It is mostly cohesive sci-fi story, but even though all this is really good stuff, and a huge improvement compared to the last, 4 or 5 years, maybe? Something along those lines. There are still some problems in the case of Orient Express. The main problem is that they're continuing this arc plot thing that they set up in the previous episode, which was entirely pointless. The whole thing of Clara debating whether she should stay or not really went nowhere. There was no point setting that up. There was no point having it in the previous episode or in the case of Orient Express, and they should have just cut that entire storyline entirely and never even done it. So wasting a good chunk of an episode doing that was pointless. And it wasted a good chunk of what Orient Express should have been focusing on. The other obvious aspect that was pointless was the girl chatting. You know, Clara and that other chick that were locked up for a bit. Yeah, that was entirely pointless. And was just doing the same sort of girl chat thing that they always tend to do. Heck, they even had the whole discussion of the do you like the Doctor thing, which is just no. Why would you do that? No. No. Just no. But nevertheless, the story's really good. Unfortunately, the plot isn't really resolved. Yes, they do resolve stopping the Mummy, thank goodness, but they don't stop resolving the person that sent them there in the first place. Who sent them there? Think about it. That's never resolved. Anywho, then you have the next story, which is, of course, Flatline, which is really freaking awesome. There's only really one issue with Flatline, and that's just the way it's resolved. It just takes the easy route, and it's kind of sad because they should have done more with that. But other than that, the story is really great. There's a lot of imagination, creativity with it. The whole idea of being, becoming a two-dimensional person, and these two-dimensional people in the 3D world and all that, and the sort of what they were doing to the TARDIS and so forth. And just everything they did with illusions and a two-dimensional world and our world was so beautifully handled and done for the most part. And then you have a lousy ending / speech. But other than that, the rest of it is really solid. Unfortunately, it doesn't have as strong as characters as the previous story did, because both these stories are written by Jamie Madison, who is basically the only good new writer that has come to the show in a long time. So, yeah. But still, these two stories are really huge improvements compared to what has happened previously for so many years. They're full of imagination and creativity and mostly cohesive science fiction. And they're the hugest improvement in all of New Who for years, really. Anywho, so those are the best stories with the 8th season with Capaldi. And then for season 9, I hate to have to say this, but Heaven Sent is a really good story. Yeah, it's a good story. It still has its problem. Basically, it had the same problem as Malware Express had, where they had the season arc thing. In the case of Heaven Sent, there's a whole dealing with the loss of Clara, which is entirely pointless because the next episode she comes back to life. Seriously, if you're gonna kill a character, keep them fucking dead. You just wasted whatever people liked about Face the Raven by finding out that she didn't even die at the end of it. So the entire story now is pointless. Heaven Sent still works, though, thanks to the fact of most of it being this beautiful alien environment with the castle and the creepy alien thing that's following it that looks like the Grim Reaper. It's all really awesome. Not to mention all the crazy sort of torture stuff that the Doctor goes through and that beautiful ending towards the end where it repeats. The only thing I would advise is if you're watching that story, just stop watching after he escapes. Like, you'll know when he escapes, but the minute he's let out and there's the whole white light and he's on the other side, just stop right there. Just literally stop and you're good. And don't even think about what happens next. But as I said, the 3 stories I've just mentioned are the strongest stories we have so far of Peter Capaldi, which is great. It's sad, though, that none of them are as flawless like the previous ones mentioned, or as flawless as all the excellent stories in like the classic series. But they are improvements, and maybe in the next couple of years, hopefully if Capaldi stays longer, because seriously, I'd be afraid when Capaldi leaves that they'll just, go back to what they generally do with Doctor Who now. Let's not think about that. But the point is, I just hope that Capaldi gets a perfect, flawless story at some point. But the 3 stories I mentioned are huge improvements. They're still really good stories. They're still worth watching and really good. And there's only one thing I question. You see, the story I mentioned, Heaven Sent. But Heaven Sent, I keep wondering how that story was good and the other Madison story wasn't. I wonder...
May we come in?
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Moffat.
Hello. What are you here?
We have grave news.
And what is that?
Well, you're not going to believe this, but that new fellow you have as a writer, he actually wrote a legitimate, cohesive piece of science fiction that is actually somewhat good.
No! That's so unfair! It's supposed to be terrible! It's full of rubbishiness and makes no damn fucking sense! No!
There, Mr. Moffat. It's alright. In the end, everything will be okay. It's just a couple more weeks and then we'll go back to our regular shit.
No! I'll get this new writer. It was the last thing I do. I have a plan. I'll get him! I'll get him!
Next year. Hello, Mr. Moff. I have this great new...
Never mind. You have this. Here's this, and this, and this, and this, and this. You have to keep all that in there. You can't change any of it. You have to add that, and that, and that. And you can only have maybe a quarter of the story or less. Ha 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 ha! Later on, I'll write something good. You'll see, you motherfuckers. I'll write something so good, and then I'll make something terrible right after it. And I'll be so deliberate that I'll have a story good that's called Heaven Sent, and then the shitty story called Hellbent, just to rub it in, you motherfucking people.